Lionel Messi arrived at an upscale residence in Beverly Hills for a planned visit, dressed in a simple and casual manner. The realtor, upon seeing him, couldn't conceal the disdain in her eyes. To her, he seemed out of place, merely wasting her valuable time. However, what transpired during that visit would not only make her regret her behavior, but also uncover a truth that would change everything. Before we proceed with this tale, please tell us where you're tuning in from. If you like stories like this one, consider subscribing to the channel as we have another unique story lined up for you tomorrow. The quiet corridors of the Beverly Hills real estate office exuded elegance, catering only to the most exclusive clients, with discretion being a highly valued trait. In the manager's office, Lionel Messi sat, dressed simply yet exuding the confidence and calmness of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. He wore a subtle smile, but his eyes indicated he was keenly attentive to every detail of the conversation. The manager, a middle-aged man with a friendly demeanor, listened carefully as Lionel described his ideal home. "I want something functional but with character," Lionel stated in a calm, direct tone. "A space that connects the indoors to nature. I need a place where I can both work and relax. It doesn't have to be extravagant, but it must have quality in every detail." The manager nodded in agreement, taking notes. He understood that Lionel valued a balance between simplicity and sophistication, a rare combination among the office's clientele, who often sought properties that screamed luxury and status. "I have a few options that might fit what you're looking for, Mr. Messi," the manager said. "I can arrange a visit to a property that I believe would be perfect." Lionel nodded but quickly added, "I have one important request. Don't mention my name to anyone. Let's keep the details between us." The manager looked momentarily puzzled, but Lionel continued, "When people know who I am, their behavior changes. They start fawning, acting differently. I don't want that. I want to be treated like anyone else, with no privileges or special treatment. I also prefer to keep my privacy intact." The manager smiled, understanding Lionel's concern. He had dealt with other celebrities before, but few were as straightforward and unpretentious as him. "Understood, Mr. Messi. I'll make sure your identity remains confidential. I'll only share the essentials with the agent conducting the showing." With that settled, Lionel scheduled the visit and left the office discreetly, drawing no attention. He trusted the manager to keep his promise. A few days later, Emily was waiting in front of the house chosen for the visit. The property was impressive, a modern masterpiece with a glass facade, clean lines, and a meticulously landscaped garden. She had received instructions from the manager, but the form she'd been given was frustratingly vague. There was no name or identity provided for the client, just a generic description of someone who valued privacy and functionality. "Must be another one of those paranoid businessmen obsessed with privacy," Emily thought as she adjusted her immaculate blazer. She was known for handling demanding clients, but she preferred those who arrived with open wallets and inflated egos, ready to impress. Then a modest car pulled into view. Emily froze for a moment, furrowing her brow. The vehicle was slightly dusty, a stark contrast to the supercars that usually parked in front of houses like this. When the car door opened, Emily almost let out a laugh of disbelief. A man stepped out calmly, wearing faded jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. His hair was slightly messy, and his relaxed demeanor seemed almost out of place in such a sophisticated setting. He walked with a calm, measured stride, completely at ease. Emily crossed her arms, eyeing him up and down, her forced smile barely concealing her disdain. "Excuse me," she began, her tone sweet but laced with sarcasm. "Are you looking for something? This property isn't open to the public." The man looked at her calmly, seemingly unaffected by her attitude. "I'm here to see the house. I have a scheduled visit," he replied without introducing himself. Emily blinked, momentarily surprised, but quickly recovered her composure. She checked her tablet again and confirmed the scheduled visit. "All right, it seems you do have a visit scheduled," she said, her skepticism barely hidden. Well, I'm Emily, the agent responsible for this property. Before we begin, I need to let you know that this is a top-tier home, priced to reflect its exclusivity. Are you sure this is what you're looking for? The man nodded, maintaining his calm demeanor. I'm sure the manager recommended this property based on what I asked for. Emily raised an eyebrow, still judging his appearance. Interesting. Well, let's get started, she said, shrugging as they headed toward the entrance. She murmured under her breath, just loud enough to be heard. I never underestimate someone's ability to look at something way out of their budget. As they entered the house, Emily returned to her professional tone, but it was still tinged with arrogance. She gestured grandly as she showcased the spaces, as though trying to impress him at all costs. This entryway was designed to make an immediate impact. It's the kind of space where you expect your guests to be awestruck. Of course, that depends on the type of people you usually have over, she said, casting a quick glance at him, implying that perhaps he didn't have guests of such high caliber. The man walked calmly, examining the house's details without reacting to her provocations. When they reached the living room, Emily continued, "The floor-to-ceiling windows are made of high-quality tempered glass. It's the kind of feature sophisticated clients value because it creates a seamless connection between indoor and outdoor spaces." He scanned the room but didn't express the admiration she was expecting. Instead, he asked a technical question. Is the acoustic insulation effective? Glass can often be a weak point in that regard. Emily paused for a moment, clearly thrown off by the question. Of course it is, she quickly replied, trying to mask her irritation. This property wasn't designed for clients worried about technical issues. It's more for those who value luxury and design. When they arrived in the kitchen, she attempted to regain control of the situation by highlighting the marble countertops. This Carrara marble is among the priciest available. It's ideal for those looking to impress at dinners or social gatherings. Do you host many events? She inquired, her tone more of a challenge than genuine curiosity. He approached the countertop, gently running his fingers over its surface. It's beautiful, but Carrara marble is quite porous. What kind of treatment was used to prevent stains? Emily took a deep breath, frustrated by the unexpected specificity of his questions, feeling as though she was losing control of the conversation. As I mentioned, this is a high-end property. All materials have been treated to ensure durability. I'm sure it won't be an issue for experienced owners, she replied, adding another passive-aggressive remark. As they moved to the upper floor, Emily could no longer conceal her impatience, discreetly rolling her eyes each time he paused to inspect a detail. When they reached the master suite, she opened the doors with dramatic flair. And here we have the master bedroom. It's the kind of space that truly embodies living with class, she said, emphasizing the last words. Some of my clients love showing this room to their friends, but maybe that's not something you do, right? He ignored the comment, walking to the windows and observing the backyard with fruit trees and an infinity pool. He smiled slightly. This is exactly what I was looking for, a place connected to nature. Emily watched him in disbelief. She couldn't understand how he seemed so confident yet so simple. He has no idea what he's getting into, she thought. But what she didn't know was that she was standing before Lionel Messi, who had chosen to keep his identity private to avoid the kind of fawning Emily seemed eager to provide to other, more obvious clients. She had no idea she was about to make the biggest mistake of her career. Emily adjusted her posture and tried to regain control of the situation as she began the property tour. Her forced smile and exaggerated gestures were painfully obvious as she attempted to impress the client, who, in her mind, had absolutely nothing to do with the environment they were in. Deep down, Emily had already decided that this visit was a waste of time, but her surface-level professionalism kept her playing the role. Well, I'll show you the property in detail, though I'm sure the style of this house is meant for people with refined taste, she said, her voice laced with passive aggression that Lionel either didn't notice or chose to ignore. Upon entering the main living area, Emily made a point of highlighting the most expensive design elements, speaking with an enthusiasm so forced that it was almost uncomfortable. This space was designed to create a visual impact. It's the kind of living room that turns any casual gathering into a magazine-worthy event. Of course, it depends on how you use the space, but I imagine that's not really something you do often, is it? Emily gave Lionel a brief glance, expecting some kind of reaction. He, however, simply observed the space calmly. He walked to the windows, lightly ran his hand along the metal frame, and asked a straightforward question. Are these windows resistant to extreme weather conditions? With so much glass, that could be a concern. Emily froze for a moment, clearly irritated that he hadn't reacted to her earlier comment. She took a deep breath and replied, still trying to maintain a professional tone. Well, this property was designed for clients who don't exactly worry about those kinds of details, she paused, flashing a condescending smile. People who buy homes like this are usually more focused on aesthetics than practical concerns. Lionel simply nodded, refusing to engage in her attempt to undermine him. His composure remained unshaken. Fair enough, I understand, he replied, turning back to take in the space again. Emily led him to the kitchen, her growing impatience thinly veiled. The kitchen was a true masterpiece of contemporary design, featuring Italian marble countertops, custom cabinetry, and state-of-the-art integrated appliances. She spread her arms as if she were unveiling a stage, clearly convinced that this was a space that would finally impress the client. This is a dream kitchen for renowned chefs. The countertops are made of Carrara marble, and the cabinetry is imported directly from Europe. It's the kind of space that makes anyone want to host important guests to show off what they have. Lionel slowly walked over to the countertop, lightly running his fingers across its surface. He asked in a calm, serene tone, "It's beautiful, but how about functionality? Do the cabinets have a soft-close system? It seems like a small detail, but it makes a big difference in daily use." Lionel walked slowly around the room, stopping beside the king-size bed and looking up at the ceiling. He seemed to be evaluating everything in a very practical way, which only made Emily more uneasy. "The lighting here is interesting," he said, pointing to the ceiling. "It looks like the design prioritizes natural light, but what about at night? Is the lighting system adjustable?" Emily sighed, clearly frustrated. "Yes, of course. The lighting system is automated. That's something that comes standard in properties at this level." She paused and added another sharp comment. "It's the kind of thing sophisticated clients don't even need to ask about. They just understand." Lionel looked at her with an enigmatic smile. He didn't respond, but it was clear he was noting every word, every gesture, and every look Emily threw his way. He knew he was being judged, but he seemed almost amused by it. Finally, Emily, now visibly impatient, led him to the backyard. The infinity pool shimmered under the sun, and the landscaping created an oasis of tranquility and beauty. This is the perfect space for social events or simply relaxing after a long day. Of course, that depends on the lifestyle of the owner, Emily said, emphasizing the last words. Lionel observed the garden with a serene smile. "This is exactly what I was looking for, a space connected to nature. That makes all the difference." Emily almost laughed. Connected to nature," she said with a sarcastic tone. "Well, for those who value that, perhaps it's ideal, although for some clients, the focus is more on impressing others than on relaxing." Lionel turned to her, still wearing the same calm expression. "Sometimes it's better to impress people with who we are rather than what we have." Emily didn't know how to respond. For the first time, she felt uncomfortable with the situation, though she still couldn't quite understand why. She had no idea she was treating Lionel Messi, one of the most admired figures in the football world, as though he were insignificant. But she was about to find out, and the lesson would be unforgettable. Emily led Lionel through the house, but her patience was wearing thin. She tried to hide her discomfort with forced smiles and passive-aggressive remarks, but deep down, she had already formed a definitive opinion of him. To Emily, this casually dressed man with his calm demeanor was far below the level of the property she was presenting. With every question Lionel asked, Emily's disdain became more evident. She discreetly rolled her eyes, sighed between explanations, and occasionally stole quick glances at her watch, hoping the tour would end soon. While they were in the living room, Lionel crouched down to examine the baseboards near the windows. The finish here is interesting. It looks like they use natural wood. Is it resistant to moisture? He asked in a calm, genuinely interested tone. Emily crossed her arms and responded impatiently. Yes, of course. Everything in this house is of the highest quality. I don't think you need to worry about small details like that. Lionel simply nodded, as though he hadn't noticed her condescending tone. He continued to explore the space, analyzing corners and discreetly testing the functionality of switches and doors. Meanwhile, Emily watched with a mix of irritation and frustration. Who asks questions like that? He's acting like some kind of expert, but he clearly doesn't belong here. He's probably not even going to buy anything. The manager must have been joking when he scheduled this visit, she thought. When they reached the second floor, Emily decided to pick up the pace of the tour, clearly tired of what she deemed a waste of time. She opened the doors to one of the guest bedrooms, gesturing briskly toward the space. This is one of the guest rooms. It's quite spacious, as you can see, but of course, I doubt it matters much if the owner doesn't usually have guests. The sarcasm in her voice was evident. Lionel walked over to the bedroom window, opened it slightly, and commented, "Good ventilation. That's important. Well-ventilated spaces are less likely to develop moisture issues on the walls." Emily let out a short, derisive laugh, shaking her head. Well, this house wasn't exactly designed for such practical concerns. It's more suited for those who appreciate aesthetics and the lifestyle it offers. Lionel looked at Emily for a brief moment, as though evaluating her words, but he didn't respond. He knew she was trying to dismiss him, but his calm demeanor remained unshaken. When they reached the second-floor terrace, Emily made a point of highlighting the panoramic view. Here we have a view that's simply unmatched. It's the kind of feature that sophisticated clients truly value. You can imagine hosting incredible parties here, or enjoying relaxing evenings with important friends, don't you think? She asked, throwing him a provocative glance. Lionel leaned on the railing and looked at the horizon for a few seconds before responding, "It's a beautiful view, yes, but for me, the most important thing is whether the environment is comfortable and functional for daily life." Emily almost let out a frustrated sigh. She was tired of hearing what she considered simplistic comments from this man. She decided to be more direct, hoping to end the tour as quickly as possible. "Look, I'll be honest. Normally, clients who are truly interested in properties at this level come prepared to close a deal. I'm not sure about your experience with homes like this, but this property is designed for those who understand and value exclusivity. Are you sure you're in the right place?" she said with a cold smile that barely concealed her hostility. Lionel turned to her slowly, with the same serene expression as always. "Always, I'm sure. But it's always good to make sure the investment is truly worth it," he replied, with a slight emphasis on the word investment that made Emily feel uneasy. When they finally returned to the ground floor, Emily let out a small sigh of relief. She was convinced that he wasn't a serious buyer and had already begun formulating how she would report to the manager that the client was just a curious time waster. But then Lionel did something that caught her completely off guard. "I'd like to see the contract and speak with the manager before making any decisions," he said calmly. Emily froze for a moment. "Contract? He's serious," she thought. Forcing a smile, she replied, Of course. I'll call the manager so we can discuss the details. But I should let you know that this is a top-tier property, and the negotiation requires a strong commitment. I hope you're aware of that." Lionel simply nodded while Emily, now visibly uncomfortable, picked up her phone to call the manager. His demeanor was beginning to make her uneasy, but she still had no idea what was about to happen. When the manager arrived, his expression immediately changed upon seeing Lionel. "Mr. Messi, what a pleasure to see you again. I hope the property is meeting your expectations," he said warmly, his tone full of respect. Emily's eyes widened in shock. "Messi?" She looked at Lionel in disbelief, realizing at that moment that she had made a monumental mistake. She hadn't just treated a casual man poorly. She had treated one of the football world's most admired figures condescendingly throughout the entire visit. I didn't know, Emily stammered, her voice trembling as she tried to justify her behavior. Lionel, however, interrupted her with a calm smile. You didn't need to know who I am to treat me with respect. Silence filled the room as the manager shot Emily a reproachful look. The other staff members, who had started to notice what was unfolding, watched from a distance, exchanging awkward glances. Lionel turned to the manager. Before we discuss any contract, I'd like to talk about how we can ensure future clients are treated fairly, no matter who they are. Emily felt her face flush. She realized she had lost much more than the chance to sell a property. She had lost her credibility. And at that moment, she understood she was facing a lesson she would never forget. Inside the luxurious house, the atmosphere had changed drastically after the revelation that the casually dressed man was none other than Lionel Messi. The room was filled with tension. Emily felt as though the air around her had grown heavy. Her heart was racing, and the silence between those present in the room was deafening. While Lionel calmly spoke with the real estate manager, Emily stood frozen in a corner, completely still. The house, once a symbol of power and sophistication for her, now seemed like a stage where her incompetence and arrogance had been laid bare. Other members of the real estate team who were present, including 2 interns and a photographer documenting the property for the listing, began to notice what was happening. Curious and, in some cases, reproachful glances were directed toward Emily. At the center of the room, Lionel and the manager spoke in hushed tones, but it was impossible for the others present not to sense the weight of the conversation. Lionel's calm and polite demeanor contrasted sharply with the visible anxiety of the manager, who was sweating lightly as he listened to the client. The house is truly impressive, Lionel began with a slight smile. It's exactly what I've been looking for. But before we proceed with the contract, I'd like to discuss something important. The manager swallowed hard and quickly replied, Of course, Mr. Messi. We're happy to adjust any details necessary. Lionel cast a brief glance in Emily's direction. She immediately averted her gaze, pretending to check something on her tablet. My concern isn't with the house, Lionel continued. It's with the way people are treated here. I requested discretion because I wanted to be treated like anyone else. And today I got a very clear idea of how things operate when someone appears to be out of place. The manager blushed with shame. He knew exactly what Lionel was referring to. I understand, Mr. Messi, and I deeply regret any negative experience you've had. I can assure you that this does not reflect the values of our team, the manager said, shooting a reproachful look at Emily, who pretended not to notice, feeling that she was the target of the criticism. Emily finally broke the silence, her voice hesitant but trying to sound confident. Mr. Messi, I apologize if I made you feel disrespected. I truly didn't know who you were. If I had known, I would never have. She hesitated, realizing she was about to say something that would make things worse. Lionel raised his hand gently, interrupting her. You didn't need to know who I am to treat me with respect, he said firmly, yet with a kind tone. My appearance, the car I drive, the clothes I wear, none of that should determine the value you place on someone. Emily felt her face grow hot. She knew Lionel was absolutely right, and no excuse could undo what had happened. She looked down at the floor, unable to meet his gaze. The others present in the house exchanged uneasy glances. Mark and Susan, 2 of the interns, whispered to each other in the corner, while the photographer, who had been adjusting his camera to take shots of the backyard, paused to observe the scene. This is going to ruin her reputation, Mark murmured. Susan shook her head. Maybe she needs us to learn. Emily has always treated people as if they were beneath her. Now she's paying the price. Meanwhile, the manager was trying to regain control of the situation. Mr. Messi, I can assure you that we'll take steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. Emily is an experienced professional, and she will learn from this, he said, attempting to defuse the situation. Lionel, however, turned his attention directly to Emily. "I hope so, because respect isn't a matter of experience or position. It's something basic, and it should be non-negotiable." Emily felt as though the ground was opening up beneath her feet. She knew her reputation was on the line, but more than that, she felt the weight of the lesson she was learning. Lionel walked over to the large window overlooking the backyard and gazed at the infinity pool. He stood silently for a few moments, admiring the view. Finally, he turned to the manager and said, "The house is beautiful. I think I'll move forward with the purchase, but I hope this experience serves as an opportunity for reflection, not just for Emily, but for everyone." The manager nodded, relieved that Lionel was still willing to proceed with the deal. He knew that the star could have easily walked away and publicly exposed what had happened. Lionel then headed toward the door. "I'll wait in the car while you prepare the final documents. Let me know when they're ready." And with that, he left, leaving behind an atmosphere still thick with tension. Emily remained silent, her mind racing with thoughts of regret and shame. She knew she would never forget that day and the lesson it had brought. The sound of Lionel's footsteps faded as he exited through the front door, leaving behind a room steeped in awkward silence. Emily stood frozen in place, her face pale and her eyes fixed on the floor. Her thoughts were chaotic. How did this happen? How didn't I realize? What are people going to say about this? The manager, on the other hand, tried to maintain his composure, though his expression betrayed his discomfort. He knew that despite Lionel's kindness, this incident wouldn't be easily forgotten, and that the responsibility for Emily's behavior fell squarely on his shoulders. A short while later, the sound of Lionel's car engine starting and then shutting off again brought everyone back to reality. He hadn't left. He was simply waiting patiently while the manager finalized the paperwork. Realizing this, Emily felt a mix of relief and tension. He still wanted to go through with the deal, which meant the situation wasn't entirely lost. However, she also knew she'd have to face him again. The manager hurriedly reviewed the documents, his hands trembling slightly as he filled out the final details. He was determined not to let any further mistakes happen that day. Emily, meanwhile, walked to the kitchen counter where a glass of water had been left. She picked it up and took a sip, hoping the cold drink would calm her nerves. But shame was an unrelenting wave, and the water offered little solace. "Emily, I need to speak with you," the manager said in a serious tone, gesturing for her to follow him to a corner of the room. His tone was firm but measured, likely to avoid adding further embarrassment in front of the other staff. Emily swallowed hard and followed him, feeling the stares of the other agents and interns on her back. Once they were at a safe distance, the manager crossed his arms and looked at her directly. "I don't even know where to start. That was unacceptable," he said bluntly. "I trusted you with one of the most important." The manager looked at Emily, his disappointment evident. "I entrusted you with one of our most significant clients," he said, pausing to choose his words carefully. "And you completely mishandled it with your actions." Emily, her voice low and filled with desperation, protested, "I didn't know who he was." The manager interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "That's precisely the issue. You didn't need to know his identity. What you did today wasn't just unprofessional. It showed a lack of respect for a client who expected to be treated like anyone else." Emily stayed silent, realizing she had no justification, but hearing her boss articulate it made her shame even more intense. "You're one of our most seasoned agents, Emily," the manager continued, "and today you demonstrated the opposite. I hope you learn from this because this is your final opportunity." Emily felt a lump in her throat but nodded quietly, understanding she had no other option. A few minutes later, Lionel was called back into the room to sign the documents. He entered with the same calm demeanor as before, as if nothing unusual had occurred. The manager handed him the papers, quickly explaining the details as Lionel reviewed them. Emily stood in the background, watching silently. She wanted desperately to apologize again, but knew that speaking might worsen the situation. She simply hoped her presence would go unnoticed. Lionel signed the papers and, before giving the final page to the manager, looked directly at Emily for a moment, causing her heart to skip a beat. He approached her, holding the contract in one hand. "Emily," he began, his voice calm but firm, "admitting our mistakes isn't easy, but it's essential for growth. I hope you take something positive from today." Emily opened her mouth to reply, but then closed it again, simply nodding as tears welled up in her eyes. Lionel handed the contract to the manager, offered a small, warm smile, and then left the room. If you like this story, we have plenty more that will touch your heart. Click the screen